Firstly, a huge warm welcome for our panelists of Kirsty, Hina and Stanley today for agreeing to give us some time to talk about their career as an actuary, and also for those participants who are online. Thank you for taking the time from your university studies to learn a bit more about the career of what actuaries do. What I'm going to do today, if we go to the next slide, please, is briefly talk about sort of the generic aspects of what an actuary is and what we do and how to succeed as an actuary, with some hints and tips on the qualification pathway. And really what we want to do is get to the panelists, Kirsty, Hina and Stanley, to talk about their experiences. Unfortunately, Jeffrey was unable to attend today, so I'll take the position of the fourth panelist to talk a bit about my career journey. So, and please ask us questions. You can ask us questions as we progress through the talk. What we'll probably do is I'll talk for a few minutes, then Kirsty, Hina, Stanley, back to myself. Then we'll open up the Q&A. So if you can use the Q&A button on the Zoom call, that's great, because that enables us to keep an easier track of what's been answered and what hasn't. But there is the chat facility as well. Okay. So first of all, talk very briefly about actuaries. Now, there are lots of ways to define actuaries. We've been thinking about it for the last 150 years. The Institute of Actuaries in Australia talk about actuaries use data for good, and then we describe specifically what we do. This slide is slightly differently because it's more tuned into your studies and what you're looking at in university and what you'll be doing, the types of studies you'll be looking at in the first few years in your career. And just to give you a flavour, actuaries, we're often on hand to give advice to decision makers on the consequences of particular actions that they choose. So we've usually got a very good holistic understanding of a business, and if somebody chooses to go down a particular pathway by offering a certain type of product, we can offer advice on what will make that successful and things to look out for to make sure the business doesn't have unintended consequences. And we do this broadly speaking with three overarching principles, if you like. And the one is that we want to be making evidence-based decisions. So you'll find in your studies, as you're doing in university, how to make those evidence-based decisions. As you progress through your career, and maybe some of the panelists talk about this, is often you don't have evidence to make a decision and you have to use something that we call judgment. Actuaries are very good at abiding by governance, so we're very useful at looking at the framework in which we can make decisions, and we tend to help the stakeholders understand, or the decision makers, sorry, understand those governance principles. And finally, one point that you probably haven't come across yet is that actuaries should be entrepreneurial. We should be looking for solutions to things. So we're not the negative naysayers. It really is, here's the positive things that you can do to be successful. The next slide, please. So many of you would have been attracted to the profession because you're good at maths, you like using your analytical skills, and you'll continue to use them throughout the rest of your working life. But what you find in the workforce is that most people don't really understand your maths. They don't want to talk about your maths. They want to use everyday English or whatever your local language is to understand the ideas. So a vitally important part of your journey is to understand the need to enhance your communication skills. The next one. Right, so how do you become an actuary? Well, you've probably seen our website, actuaries.asn.au, and there's an education tower on there, which has a lot of detail around how to become an actuary. Looking at this one slide summary of the process, at university, you study those in the grey boxes, the foundation program, the sort of more mathematical-based topics. You also have the opportunity at many of the universities to study what we call the actuarial control cycle. Other names, that's actuarial practice and control. What do actuaries do in practice? As well as this data science principles subject. So those 8 subjects are at university. Then you come to the Actuaries Institute, where you study another 2 subjects in the actuary program. I won't go through them, but one of them is a communications subject. And then When you're successful at those and you've got 1 year's work experience, you're what we call an associate, which is a fully qualified actuary under the International Actuarial Association rules. Most of our members decide to progress to the fellowship program, which you have to take 3 subjects. There's a wide variety of choices these days. You can stick with the life insurance route or the general insurance route if you like. But as you notice, there are other products in there. We've just launched a banking subject, enterprise risk management. So many of our students, as they come to us and join us as general members, they take a wide variety of different paths. Many choose those traditional domains of general and life and superannuation, but about 60% of our students at the moment qualify through the data science applications subject. So again, once you've finished your exams with another 2 years total work experience, you can become a fellow, which is merely the start of your journey, as a panelist will talk shortly. So the next one, please. How do we help you as students coming from the university environment to the professional life environment? So you'll be in full-time work. Many of you will be in employers which will allow you typically a day off a week for study. Our education system is really designed with the thought process as you at the heart of the system. So we have something for every subject. We have somebody called a chief examiner whose job it is to teach you through the subjects, set assessments, and guide you to how to study properly and effectively to obtain a pass in subjects. The overarching principle that we adopt at the Institute is that we expect a well-prepared student should be able to pass the examinations. What I'm going to do now is introduce our panelists very briefly, and then I'm going to introduce one individually. So we have Kirsty from Azuria Partners, Stanley from Resolution Life, and Hina from AMIA Advisory. Each of them is going to talk for about 4 to 5 minutes on their journey. And then at the end, I'll give you a quick 4 minutes of mine, and then we're open for a Q&A session. So if we go first to Kirsty, I'm going to introduce Kirsty, who is a partner at Azuria Partners. So Kirsty is a qualified actuary with over 20 years experience working in the life insurance industry in Australia, UK, and Ireland. She has diverse experience across the life insurance value chain, having held senior roles in both actuarial and non-actuarial functions, from operations and data transformation through to pricing, business development, and strategy. So welcome, Kirsty, and please help us understand your career journey.
Hi, thanks, Mike, for that introduction, and thanks everyone for joining this afternoon and allowing me a few minutes to talk about what life insurance actuaries do and about my career. So what does a typical day at a life insurer look like for an actuary? Well, most actuarial graduates start their career in either the pricing or the finance areas. Simplistically, a pricing actuary helps set and maintain the appropriate price to charge for life insurance products. And the finance or the valuation actuary works out how much money to put aside once those policies have been sold so that the company has enough money to pay for the claims in the future. But actuaries also play a very big role across most parts of a life insurer, often with several leadership roles, including the CEO, being held by an actuary. I started off my career as a very quiet actuarial student with a knack for numbers and a keen interest in sort of wondering how everything in a company fits together. I landed my first job at MLC as a summer intern when I was 18, which ultimately led to a graduate position. So I really ended up in life insurance by chance to start with, but I loved the technical and the business challenges. After I qualified, I decided to pursue my passion for travel, and I relocated to London with my partner. It was then that I shifted from working for a life insurer to a life reinsurer. A reinsurer is essentially the insurer of the insurer, and reinsurers tend to be even more full of actuaries than life insurers. I think this is because a reinsurer is a business-to-business model and needs to demonstrate greater technical expertise to add value, which actuaries have in great quantities, whereas a life insurer also needs to balance out their technical expertise with other skill sets such as sales, marketing, and customer service. One thing I learned when I moved to the UK was how much easier it was for me to find work in a new country than my non-actuarial friends. I found it very easy to secure a good role before I even arrived in London. And an Australian actuarial qualification is considered interchangeable with a UK one, and this is actually not the case in many other professions. In the many years that I worked for Munich Re, I had the opportunity to work on projects with actuaries from all around the world. I find the challenges by countries fascinatingly similar but different at the same time. For example, the products, the regulatory environment, and the competitive landscapes are always different, but you always need to consider all three when making decisions. During my time at Munich, I was also lucky enough to be given many different opportunities to both take on roles in different teams, but also greater leadership opportunities. I had headed up the pricing, finance, valuation, operations, and business development teams over the last 10 years. And now I own my own business. What I would say in all of my roles I've had in common is that they always create the opportunity to solve problems. And these problems usually involve a combination of understanding the business or the commercial aspects, some kind of financial modelling, and always some kind of judgment. What have I learned in the process of taking on these different roles, and what advice would I give to you all starting out on your actuarial journey? First, be curious and brave. Don't be afraid to take a calculated risk in your career. Second, never forget the core of your actuarial training that you're learning now, especially the control cycle and thinking holistically. It really does come in handy every day in your working life. Third, communication skills really are a key differentiator in the workforce. You don't have to be the smartest, most technical person in the room to make the biggest impact. And finally, and don't underestimate this, always apply common sense to any decision and recommendation you make. And I will wrap it up here. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. I think some of your journey resonated with me, and I'll talk about that later on, especially the international component. Next on the list, I can introduce Stanley Zhu, who is a senior data analyst in the Resolution Life based in Sydney. Stanley works in data analytics, finance, life insurance, and reinsurance. A significant highlight of Stanley's career was to assist in delivering one of the biggest reinsurance arrangements in Australia. And Stanley summarizes himself as being open-minded and adventurous with risk-averse mindset. So with that in mind, please give us some more flavour of your journey, Stanley.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for introducing to all the audience. So thank you everyone for joining for the webinars. So just to give you a bit of flavor of my career path. So I'm not as interesting as like Kirsty is. Like I've been traveling like all internationally, like to everywhere in the part of the world, but mostly focused in Australia. But that's still like doesn't stop me from like rotating from different part of the company as well. So pretty much my whole career path is pretty much with the with Resolution Life, or AMP previously that they call it, for the last like 15, 16 years. But starting as a graduate back in 2008, which which is the GFCE. So it was quite challenging back in the days because, like, I think, as you all know, the financial condition wasn't quite good globally, and as well as a lot of company was cutting costs. So I guess the first piece of advice that I want to give to you guys is like just be curious and try to be try to get into the industry once you have a chance to if you have a chance. So the first step I actually do is actually I don't work in the traditional like actual world, but I work in like a actual system world to start off with. So get yourself to like one step into the industry so that you understand how the industry works as a starting point. So that's the first piece of like advice, and that's how I get into the industry back in 2008. So as an actuary, as a graduate at that time, so I kind of working with quite a lot of knowledgeable people back in AMP, and they actually share a lot of good knowledge, and then which help us actually to build that kind of like a learning pathway towards more like an actuary path. So after like I think 2 years in the system world, then I move on to like a more technical, a traditional valuation actuary role, which is working in the life insurance industry, looking at a lot of valuation for the wealth protection products for a few years, which is a one of the key, I think, stepping stone for myself is to build up the very technical knowledge about like the insurance products itself, and which is actually very useful for assisting myself to pass all the actual exams. So one of the key I can take away is for part 3 exam that Michael was just calling out before, a lot of those content actually is very closely, and the course, the structure is actually very closely designed with the actual industry practice. So working in the industry actually help you to pass those exams as well. So I think one piece of advice there is before you do the exam, make sure I think you actually work in the industry, work in the area that you actually quite keen to work in. At least you get some exposure, and that will definitely help you to pass those exams in the part 3 subjects. After the valuations, after working in valuation for a few years, then I move on to the product and advice teams, which is working closely with the appointed actuaries, which is also very different. So what I did is more like using all the technical knowledge actually that we learned from the learned in the last few years, then kind of like applying like a lot of judgment based on the appointed actuary mindset, then to give like product and pricing teams some advice on what they need to be aware of, like whether there's any reinsurance arrangement they need to be considering, and how they risk mitigate certain like pricing or product designs changes as well. And after a few interesting years with the appointed actuaries, and then then move on to a project role, which is working closely with like one of the major reinsurers in Australia. So try to deliver one of the biggest reinsurance deal for AMP back in the days, which is a very different kind of like arrangement and mindset as well, because traditionally just working as a product actuaries or valuation actuary as within a life company, but now we kind of partnering with like reinsurers. You have to do a lot of negotiations and that kind of conversations, which is another type of like I guess like a skill set and knowledge learned. And after that, I decided to take a challenge to move away from a traditional actual world, which is then move on to data analytics, which is quite interesting as well. Because like the reason I take that move is I think the first step is because back in the project within reinsurance, we saw a lot of data inquiry, data issues, and that kind of things, and which kind of prompt me thinking like, okay, data is one of the key trend for the next like whatever years. So I want to be like, as a traditional actuary, we don't have a lot of exposure to data, so I want to like kind of like put my foot into the data world. So that's why I make that move on to the data analytic world. So try to understand a bit more in the data, what's going on in the data world. So in the last I think 3 years, I was working in the data world, and recently I kind of stepping out from the data world back into the actual family now, which is now in the capital management team. So which is part of quite a journey, because like I'm stepping in from actual and then stepping out of actual and just stepping back into the actual world. So I guess my piece of advice to you guys is just I think similar to what Kirsty was saying before, be curious and don't afraid of like of changes as well, because like the professional or the education that the Actuary of situation provide to us actually is a skill set that you can be applicable for a lot of the areas as well. So just be curious, and you will actually find a lot of like interesting adventures and experience that you can find in different area of the business, or even like within Australia, or even outside of Australia as well. I think that's all from me, Michael.
Thank you very much, Stanley. That's fascinating how somebody comes in and out of actuarial. Good message to people. I'm sure we'll pick up more on that in the Q&A. So I'm going to introduce Hina Shah now. So Hina, oh, where's my notes gone? Yeah, sorry, I just flicked over the page. Hina works for AMEA Advisory in Perth. Hina is a seasoned management consultant with diverse experience in superannuation and management consulting across multiple industries. Specializing in strategic planning and performance improvement project management, she brings a track record of driving results. With expertise in navigating complex regulatory landscapes, she excels in delivering actionable insights and guiding organisations towards optimal financial outcomes. Hina is a fellow of the Institute of Actuaries of Australia and a Prince 2 practitioner. Now, I have no idea what a Prince 2 practitioner. I'm excited to find out what that is. Okay, so Hina, thank you very much for the time. Please go on.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you everyone for joining the call today and giving me the opportunity to talk about my career journey. So starting off with why did I even pick up to become an actuary? I loved maths and I loved statistics, so it's cool. I had a teacher who said, well, if you like maths and if you like stats, your career could be an actuary or you could become a maths teacher. So quite strict and linear, right? You could do this or you could do that. And so the actuary was the decided career at that point in time. I came to Australia and did my degree at Curtin, and then worked my post-qualification exams all the way through whilst I was working at PwC, where I actually worked in the superannuation and the asset consulting stream. So that's how the career journey happened, or how my education piece getting to becoming an actuary happened. But when then talking about what work and what kind of work I did and why I have moved on to management consulting and do different things. When I was at PwC, I worked as an employee benefit valuation. So things like retirement incomes, annual leave, long service leave liability, and valuing this portfolio of liability. The primary purpose of doing that would have been to understand financial liabilities, provisioning, and other allowances for people's for the company's financial statements. So we did the valuation every year on year, and every year you would do a little bit of a status check on what had happened last year, what we predicted was going to happen next year, what we predicted was going to happen in the year, and what has happened. So do some checks there. But at the time when I was working in the superannuation industry, the industry had gone through massive changes, which then the clients turned to the actuaries to help navigate the big change, because we can deal with the vague and we can deal with making sense of the grey. So we were tasked with understanding the legislative changes. We were tasked with helping them develop solutions to make sure they remain compliant to the new rules and the new way of providing superannuation came. So you can see how there's the element of the wage situation, and there's also the element of problem solving to make sure the client remained compliant. After that, I went into my first foray into consulting was at the Government Employees Superannuation Board in WA, which is a $20 billion superannuation fund, probably grown more than that. And I went from being a consultant, telling the clients, this is how you can deal with the legislation and this is what you can do, to going in-house with the client and working with the client on how they're going to meet their requirements and what they're going to do to be compliant. The other thing that was happening to that organization at that time, the WA government had decided that they were going to outsource 60% of the organization to a private third-party provider. And the third-party provider is going to provide all the services. So again, making sense of the way situation with the legislative changes, problem solving, what part of the business can we outsource and what part of the business is critical to us that we have to control. So problem solving, and then doing some analytics on the bids that were coming through, doing some analytics on forecasting with what our members are going to do and what that value could be. Once I finished that, I then transitioned full on into an in-house consulting house, working with a consulting house across multiple industries, you name it, health insurance, finance, mining. I live in WA, so mining had to be one of those, tourism, and a few others. With the current scenario or the current work that I do, there's a lot of unique problems that clients come to us with a unique challenge that they're trying to resolve, which is great. So you have to understand what their problem is. Often what they tell you their problem is not really their problem. When you ask a few more questions, you go, wait a minute, that's not your problem. This is your problem. Then you work out what solution, how best they can address the solution. Often these solutions will require some financial modeling or analytics to understand and underpin the assumptions for why the solution you've done is going to give them an outcome. And the other most important thing that I think I do a lot at this stage is communicating, bringing people together, making them work together to get an answer for the business and execute the solution to actually get an outcome for those companies. So I did that in-house for a bit, and 2 years ago I set up my own business to do the same but different. And that's where I am. So my advice to the people is you have to persevere in your studies, and you have to keep getting those qualifications and packed away so it's ready to go. In terms of while you're working, effective communication. So read your audience, work out how they're going to absorb that information and then provide that information in that format is really important. Collective problem solving. I've never seen any situation where one person has the answers to everything. You have to somehow work out this strange jigsaw puzzle of people to come together so that you can get a solution. And sometimes they are all conflicting answers. And so you have to then go back to data and facts to actually build a plausible answer. So work with people, but back it up with data every day you can. And always logic check your solution. Sometimes the model, somebody by mistake has overridden something, is going to tell you 10 million, but the answer might be 1 million. So logic check your solutions. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Tina. That's very illuminating, and we've got quite a few questions coming in. I like the last one on the 10 million versus 1 million, and I was talking to a relatively junior actuarial colleague a while ago, and what they said is they don't understand it yet how you use your actuarial magic to distinguish between 10 million and 1 million. And I said you'll get there. You'll figure it out one day. Yeah. Look, we were going to have 4 panelists. Jeffrey couldn't come, and so I'll give you a few minutes of myself before we jump onto the Q&A because you were promised 4. So I'm Mike Callan. I've got just, I don't know, 30 odd years, nearly 35 years experience in the actuarial field. I didn't start off doing an actuarial science degree. I was trained in the UK. I was doing maths. I was in my honours year when people were disappearing to become accountants and computer programmers. Then the word actuary popped up every now and then. I'd already committed to doing a PhD, but got got into it at the end of my PhD. Thought it looks like an interesting career. I joined a medium-sized firm, and I stayed there for 18 years in one firm, which seems a long time. And during that period, I had 5 leaving parties. So on the 5th leaving party, I think they threw me out. I'm slightly joking, but you have the opportunity to move around with this qualification. Kirsty mentioned this earlier. So if you get good at your job, other departments want you, and you have the opportunity. I've moved from Bristol to the place called the Isle of Man to London. I went to work in our derivatives and equity department because life insurance companies tend to own a lot of assets. Was sent abroad to continental Europe. So I worked in Germany, Holland, Italy, based in Luxembourg. Quite complicated. They all use different languages, but it was very similar things of techniques and tools and product development. So it was a very entrepreneurial type role for a number of years, trying to figure out how our products could sell better. And I had to work with, and I love working with them, not had to, I love working with our sales and our marketing department and administrators right across the business. And I felt I was in a very privileged position because the actuarial studies enabled me to see right across all these different departments and understand how everything fitted together quite well. And that gave me an advantage compared to others. So you're always seen as the person who understood the products and understood how it fitted together. And then it was quite exciting working with marketing and salespeople, figuring out how we could promote our products and explain how they were better than other people's products. So you have those opportunities if you want. Other people like staying in the valuation department and doing things in there. I've quite a few years in there. When I started, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have computers connected to each other. We used to connect with cables every now and then. Spreadsheets were quite nascent at the time. So things moved on significantly. I stayed in continental Europe for a number of years before coming upstairs to Australia, to the beautiful sunshine state of Melbourne. And that was spent a few years working for one of the big 4 companies, Deloitte, before doing some work at A&P. And then I decided to have a big career change and jumped ship to Monash University to set up their control cycle course. Did that for a few years before arriving at the Institute to set up the newly revamped fellowshipped course, and been working with about 10 actuaries to develop a fellowship program and an actuary program to help you guys come through it as quick as you possibly can, whilst maintaining the standards that we've always had. But the key things here, we're really looking forward to getting you on board, taking you through our system, training you to be new fellows, and helping you get on the career ladder and onwards and upwards as early as we possibly can. So that's a very quick overview of myself. Now, what I'm going to do now is go to the Q&A session. We've got a few questions in. Some are general and some are directed at specific panelists. The first one, I just read out to clarify something. Work experience. Do you need work experience to be eligible for entry into the Actuary Fellowship program? No, you don't. You don't need that. You come on board with us and you do your work experience. It's separate from the Actuaries Institute. You don't have to have it to become a member. And yes, you will keep the slides. Louise informs me that you'll be sent an email after the session with the slides in. Now, the first one, we've got a question for Kirsty. What would you say are the top 5 things which helped you get an internship at MLC at aged 18?
It's a great question. And I think I was so listening so much to everyone else's presentations, I didn't answer. So first of all, I would say it is a lot harder now than it was 25 years ago when I came out, when I was studying actuarial. There's a lot more actuarial students and there's probably less internships than there was back then. But having said that, I've hired lots of interns over recent years as well. So I have a few good tips. I think, first of all, that your grades are going to be the first filter. So getting good grades, that's the data point, the first data point that people will filter applications on. So that's the first point. The second is that make it short and concise, but find a way to demonstrate your communication skills, either through your CV or your cover letter. It should only be a sentence or something. But yeah, communication skills and written skills are key. And don't use AI. We can tell when people get someone to rewrite their CV or cover letter in AI. Make sure if you use something to help you, that you make sure that it reads like you would write it at the end. Thirdly, get involved in your university groups, anything that gives you relevant experience that demonstrates you're a go-getter. And maybe fourth, lastly, utilize your network at university. So there are internships available. Sometimes you have to go looking for them. Use your university clubs, do your own research around companies. It doesn't hurt to go asking. I got mine by sending a letter to 30 different companies. It was by snail mail back in those days. But if you don't have a go, you never know what opportunities you miss.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kirsty. And for all those out there who don't get an internship, it's not the end of the world. There's only a limited number of internships. In some senses, it's great if you get an internship. It's like an elongated interview, but many people get jobs without internships. I've talked to many successful fellows who began their working life not in a traditional actuarial firm. They've been in a related industry and then have come in and managed to get into the fold. So you might need a bit of perseverance sometimes, but you can get there, is the thing. So the next question is, do you have any tips for new graduates without any experience relating to insurance industry who want to secure, well, it's a related question. How do you secure that entry-level job? Let's go over to Hina, who's in Perth, which is quite a tough area to get an entry-level job. You're on mute, Hina.
I just mute. Sorry. So entry-level jobs in Perth. Yes. I know all the fellows in WA, and we all know each other. So it's a little bit like a really small space in there. But what the university really works harder here in WA is they have built a network of employers who will do work experience and facilitate some kind of a opportunity to experience work and also experience the kind of work you do. So I would say if in your second year of uni, you should start pushing your way through some of those work experience types jobs. So you can start building a bit of a reputation and a bit of an experience to get those entry-level jobs. The second thing I would say is what Kirsty said. Yes, back then it was now male, but it's no longer snail mail. You've just got to keep trying, and you can try in the traditional roles that you want, but also the adjacent roles. And in WA, when I mentor people, I often ask them the question of, is it pure actuarial that you're looking at, or are you looking at a data option, or are you looking at some other insurance, some other policy kind of option as well? So it's keep it open, keep applying, and don't say I've applied at one place, so that's all I'm done. You have to apply to a few for one to land.
Thank you, Hina. Stanley, do you have any tips? Are you on mute, Stanley? Sorry.
Yeah, so for entry levels, so I guess like in the senior, I think try to reach out to like some of your uni coordinator at the moment. They do have like a lot of like, I think they do have like, I think a lot of the employers, they do regularly engage with your uni coordinator, try to see if they have any internship as well. So try to like get into the industry or get into like any corporate role as soon as you could. I guess like just try to demonstrate to the HR that you actually can work with in a corporate environment. So that I think it's just more like demonstrating you are capable of working as a team. So instead of like just I think a lot of students are quite good at demonstrating their own academic result, but I think the other key one is actually making sure that you can demonstrate your team working abilities. So if you can have some kind of experience experience that demonstrating you are okay as a team players, then or even like in other areas, like or working in the potentially in a social like environment, like social club, or helping out in organizing the event, that kind of thing. So at least you can demonstrate that you are a part of the team player. Then that will also help as entering in as an entry position as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'd just like to add on the interview process. Just remember that it can be quite a cold environment, but just be yourself. They're really looking at you, not just for your technical skills, because most of you will have the right technical skills. So it comes back to that personality skills. You know, do I want to work with you? That's one of the things that's coming across. So that's really useful. So, and you've all got access to the student societies and access to things in your universities to have a practice at interview techniques, etc. Now we've got the next question on my list. I've got one directed to Kirsty. How would you contrast the work of being in a life insurance company versus a life reinsurance company?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's not that, in a lot of ways, it's not that different. I think it's generally reinsurers are smaller teams, so you have fewer people. So you tend to have, there's very few entry level jobs. They tend to wait until people are closer to qualification or qualified. It's just the nature of the work, because they don't have as big actuarial teams. But I would say that the work in the life insurer is inherently closer to the customer. So you spend more time thinking about the end customer, where a reinsurer is more of a business to business. So you spend more time thinking about the impact of both companies' balance sheets, for example. And so I think that's sort of a subtle difference, but ultimately you're still working in life insurance and supporting the same end customer, just through a slightly different lens.
Great. There's a couple that I'll have a go at answering. Now, would you suggest completing the actuarial control cycles at an accredited university or with the Actuaries Institute? We currently don't offer the actuarial control cycle. It's only offered at the 8 accredited universities, 7 in Australia and 1 in New Zealand. And I think at least 2 or 3 of them you can do it by distance learning, so you don't actually have to go there. And the way you can do it, you can either do it through the honours year or what's called a non-award basis. So you take the units that build towards the actuarial control cycle subject, but not as a formal part of a degree. The next one is about, I'm going to ask the panelists this one. I've got my own thoughts on it, but I'd like to involve everybody. Some universities offer an actual research thesis subject alongside the control cycle. That's usually part of an honours year. Does this subject benefit one's actuarial career and knowledge, or is it only beneficial to those who have a passion for research and are seeking to continue their studies in a PhD degree? Thanks. A bit tongue-tied there. I'm going to ask Kina. Do you have any views on that?
Yeah. So often that thesis is related to one of the actuarial fields that we're working in, like a life insurance or a super or something like that. So it actually builds your knowledge base, yes, 1. But 2, it also builds you a bit of an individual aware recognition in the industry that you're working in, which opens a whole lot more doors from a work perspective or a networking perspective. It might not even be a first job that it's helped you. It might be your second job that it's helped you get to. So it's actually a good thing to do. But I haven't done any research thesis, but I can see there is benefit in doing that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on because there's quite a few questions here. We've got about 15 minutes left. To all the speakers who have, where's it gone? To all the speakers who are comfortable to answer, I've heard that actuaries have the best work-life balance. And to what extent does that apply to your current role? So Stanley thinks this is quite funny.
I guess work-life balance is really depends on how you actually managing your work and also managing your upstream and downstream as well. So I guess oh, sorry. I guess it really depends on how it can be achievable like in a lot of industry as well. So it's really depends on how you're managing your workflow and also you're managing your expectations. But in the actual world, we do have these very busy period as well. So I would say most of the time we do achieve like work-life balances, but in certain financial busy period, then yeah, that you might have a bit of trade-off there. So but in general, I think it's still achievable in my career path. So not sure about others.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody want to have a go at that one?
Well, it's the actuarial profession to a degree is more predictable on what your work life is going to be, where your workflow is going to be than some of the other industries. So you can control.
Kirsty?
I would say that it's probably not as simple as it is. I think it very much depends on the career path within actuarial you choose and how ambitious you are. I think it's like in anything, to a certain extent, the more you put in, the more you get out. But yeah, you have some control over, I would say.
Exactly. Good. Thank you. The next one is a bit of a technical education question. Is it possible to take control cycle, data science, LM, and communications course online? Yes. Is it possible to take these courses before finishing with all the core subjects? We would strongly advise not to, as they assume knowledge of the earlier subjects. And so you're best to take your foundation studies and then progress through the studies, the subjects, as you can see on the diagram on our webpage. I'll come back to the mentor one if we've got any times. What advice do you have for international students for employment in Australia? This is quite a good one because this comes up time and time again. And you three are, either employers and use your own company, Kirsty. So, what happens in this environment? Any advice for people?
This is a really tricky subject. That's something we debate at Azuria a lot because we have a number of international students who are great performers. And so I think the sort of demonstrating your English language skills, I think that's even more important when you're overseas. There is only so much we can do about employment law. That's what I would say as an employer. And so we understand the struggles and the difficulties that it presents international students. I would just say be honest. There's no point lying about your working right up front. It'll get caught out before you get too far through the process anyway. But appreciate it's a really tricky and increasingly difficult when you're coming in as an international student.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kirsty. We have a question directly for Stanley. One of the guests is doing a double degree in actuarial studies and computer science, enjoying both and don't want to choose. Is there an overlap or intersection between the two, particularly in data science or analytics, perhaps?
Oh yeah. I guess that's one of the key questions as well in one of the USW open day as well. So I think a lot of people actually quite interested. So yeah, a lot of people are interested in doing a double degree, especially in the computer science and versus the actual world as well. Yeah, that's some especially in the current industry world. So I think computer science or coding based work is actually getting more common in the current industry. So you definitely benefit from having both types of knowledge while you're having the analytical world knowledge as well as using your computer powers and coding skill to actually to help you to streamline and run a lot of those analytic skills. So I guess one of the challenges that the thing that I actually do remind people when they're doing the double degree, especially with computer science, actually is the workflow or the workload that they actually anticipated within the course. Because I think actuarial course is actually quite heavy in terms of like coursework, but while computer science also quite like they have a lot of like assignment work, which is you need to spend a lot of time as well. So just making sure, I think yeah, if you're interested in both area, I don't think you have to choose, because I think both are still like related, and then they actually can be quite beneficial in the current industry, or even though whatever whether you're working in the life insurance or general insurance, or even with major reinsurers. So both set of skill set is actually very important. So I wouldn't say like if you can manage both, I think I would suggest you can just do both, but like I wouldn't have like suggest like to pick one or the others, because like both of them are quite important in the current environment.
Thank you, Stanley. We've got one around communication skills, and we've highlighted them quite often this evening. What are some actionable things an undergraduate student can do to develop communication skills to upskill them on a short to medium term timescale? And I'll throw to Hina.
I was going to say Toastmasters or something like that. If you could participate in that, that helps you talk about topics, but that also helps you collect your thoughts and verbally communicate to people. Where the other thing that I had to learn the hard way when I transitioned to management consulting was preparing slide decks and communications. So those are some of the other things that you want to try and hone in on and look for opportunities to do more of that.
Thank you. As a teacher of many of you, hopefully in the future, one thing I would like you to start right away is learning to write. And that's a key differentiator. Being able to express yourselves, ideas concisely, clearly, and completely on paper is something that you have to practice. I just moved on to the next one. I'll throw this one to Kirsty. This is somebody they've not done an actuarial science degree, but they want to become an actuary. How do they start?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I guess it depends where you are in your career, but sort of assuming that you're relatively early in your career, I'd give the Actuaries website a bit of a plug. There's some good reading and background material in there. I think to sort of understand a bit around what the process is to become an actuary, it is a bit of a journey to get qualified. I think it's getting easier, but it is a several year commitment. I think then also have a look around some of the main employers. If you have an area in particular, try and narrow it down where it is, and then potentially where you are, it might be around getting a role in a company that employs actuaries, but you're not committed to being an actuary yet, to see if that as a stepping stone.
Yeah, good. Thank you. But the next two questions on my list are related, and it's one of the guys has been unsuccessful so far in obtaining a vacation or internship. And so they're asking about a few little tips on improving themselves. And the other one, it's very similar to that, is what happens if you miss out on your penultimate year vacation or internships? What do you need to catch up and be just as competitive as peers who've landed an internship? So I think maybe each of you could give 1 minute of your time. You're faced with a situation, somebody's written to you, you're going to looking to employ somebody and they haven't had an internship. What does that mean to you? I'll throw it to Stanley first. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say internship is like it's the 100% important stuff, but I think it's good to have. But if you don't have the internship, like you still can explore, as I mentioned before, you can still explore or expose yourself to the industry by enrolling to others role in the same company that hire actuary as well. So I do have a colleague that's been working with me for like at least like 18 years now. So he is actually starting his role as an administrator. So he actually working in administration teams while he actually kind of like doing his exam as well while he's working as administrator, and he know the company actually do hire actuary, then I think that's another leeway that you can actually then do like internal transfer to a actuary role, while I guess HR can see like you've been working towards to a profession to get into the actual role. So there's another, like if you miss the internship, that's not the end of the world, but I also suggest to at least you get into the industry first, you get some exposure to the corporate role to get some experience, then I think can then gradually transfer back into the actual roles.
Okay, great. Maybe another panelist has a minute on that, because we've still got a couple more questions I'd like to get through. Hina or Kirsty?
My advice would be the same. Go into a parallel or a similar kind of industry like data or something. There's plenty of roles there. If the actuarial is a bit narrow, just get in somewhere and then work your way around.
Okay, great. Just a few to try and pick some out in the last few minutes. Oh, I did see one on AI. Yeah, right at the end, Celine said. Do you think AI will change the role of an actuary? Okay, and Stanley's. I might with you first, Stanley, and then get everybody else on it.
Um, I wouldn't say no, because like I would say AI would change, like similar to like back in the days when like Office or Excel like Word has been introduced, right? So back in the day, I think that's a lot of tedious work that actually require a lot of human power to do those stuff. I think after those software or like AI has been introduced nowadays, I guess the level of work will be different, but I guess like you can't. Like the nature of the role of actuary still can't be replaced from my point of view, because like there's still a lot of like a judgment that actually required from an actuary role on a day-to-day basis. So and I don't see AI can be a useful tool to help us to fast track our processes, but I don't think that actually replacing actuary as because we are not doing like simple or very like process-driven kind of tasks at the moment. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stanley. Now, this one's to Kirsty, because Kirsty, during your talk, you mentioned about the actual control cycle, and it helps you on a daily basis. So somebody said, oh, well, I've passed ACC, but I'm still confused how you apply what you learn in this unit to your daily tasks. Could you please shed some light on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to be honest, I probably appreciate it more now than I did at the start of my career, because at the start of your career, you get given tasks that are a small piece of the puzzle. As you get more experience, you get given tasks that encompass more. And then after 20 years, you get to see less than 20 years, but after say 5 to 10 years, you start to get to see you get given tasks that mean you look at the whole piece of the puzzle. So I would say don't give up hope, but I think you've also got to be patient. It's you have to do a lot of grunt work and learn some of the basics before you get to see the whole picture.
Thank you, Kirsty. Right, we've got one. There's 4 questions left. We've got time for one more question. Where somebody's thanks all the panelists for sharing their experiences. They're an actuarial student. They think actuarial study is a small subject or program in terms of the number of students. So compared to those bigger or more popular subjects like finance, stats, data analysis, etc., what advantages does an actuarial program give to their students? I'll ask Hina.
So I am a prime example of this, where I kicked off my career as working with an actuarial consulting team, working with the actuaries, and then transitioned to management consultants. So yes, to the actuarial profession teaches you resilience, the amount of times you have to do those exams. It teaches you how to think, and it teaches you how to look into the minutiae, look at the detail, but also come back out to the top and look at the holistic picture. A lot of the other jobs don't. They like try to get you into, this is the pocket of finance world. This is the bit that you do, whereas the actuarial profession makes you go through everything. And even when you're working, it makes you go through everything, which means that you can take a whole different aspects of the actuarial career and actuarial stuff into other careers, job 2, job 3 of your career. So I think there's a whole lot to learn from the actuarial degree in your actuarial career and take it elsewhere as well.
Okay. Thank you, Hina. We're just about out of time. There's a couple more questions come in. I've got time to go through them. One more I can go through. How important is it to get work experience, particularly if you doesn't have prior corporate work experience? Should I prioritize completing an honours year or trying to find a full-time job, say in an admin role? I mean, my advice to that is that's entirely up to how you want to do it. It's a very early part of your career, so you've got a long journey after that. I reckon we're probably 50-50 in the profession, with people doing honours year stroke starting straight away and then doing the control cycle as part of a day release scheme. So there's no right answer for that. Okay. And with that, we're just about out of time. I'd like to thank the panelists again for sharing your career journey, and I hope the people on the call have learned quite a few things today. And I wish you all the best in your future. We hope to see you join the Actuaries Institute in the next few years. Thank you all. Bye.